Now we're going to build out a futuristic UI element for the goggles. I have this reference image here that I'm going to basically use to copy this corner of the UI and then mirror it across these corners so it'll be perfectly symmetrical. You can see this one isn't exactly symmetrical, but for ours we'll just make it such. So I'll be using Affinity Designer, but you can also use Adobe Illustrator or any other vector program. But I just really like Affinity Designer. So I'll make a new document. 1024 square is good. And in Affinity Designer, the way you mirror things is you make a symbol and then duplicate that, and then everything inside that symbol gets duplicated everywhere that it exists. So I'll draw the center lines. And with snapping enabled, it's really easy to find where the center is. It just kind of snaps right to it. So now we have 4 quadrants. We can just make a simple cube in one of them and hit V to move it around. And I'll be mirroring this over this axis, so I'll just drag it and snap it there. And then in View, Studio, Symbols, it makes this little window, and we'll create a symbol from this square. Now you can see this rectangle is inside the symbol. So anything we change to this rectangle will propagate to all the symbols. So hitting Control or Command J, we can duplicate this, and I'll move it to this side, and then mirror it across this axis, and then snap it in here, and then I'll grab both of these, holding Control to select multiple, and then hit Control J again. And then I'll slide these up and then mirror those across the x-axis and then snap them in place. So they should all be perfectly centered. And if I grab the rectangle inside of here, you can see now we have 2 axes of symmetry because whatever happens inside this symbol happens in all the symbols. So with this setup in place, now we can start designing. I'll drag in this reference image and make sure it's totally centered. And to make sure it's centered, I'll drag it all the way to the bottom so we can see these lines. And because they're black, it's kind of hard to see, so I'll change the color. Make the edges, I guess, white for now. And now I can just nudge this with the arrow keys. Just get nice and centered. And now we can hide these axes because we don't need those. And I'll hit Control J to put them in a group and just name this axes. And the reference image is a little overpowering. So let's select this and turn down the opacity. Now we can see what we're doing. And this rectangle, I'll just hide this for now. I think we could delete it, but I don't want to mess up any of this setup, so I think we'll just keep that there as a base. So now what I'm going to do is essentially just start tracing this reference image just to kind of rebuild it from scratch. And that way we'll have it as a perfect vector. We can scale it however we want. And we're just not copying directly off of this. Like, we're not using this exact image. We're using it as inspiration, changing it a little bit, and making it our own. And to keep things organized, we should label all these. So we have top right. Well, it looks like the name of the symbol propagates to all the other instances of the symbol, so that's not going to work. But I guess if we just keep working in this last one here, we should be fine. I'm also going to lock this reference image. That way we can't select it and it's just back there. And I'll make sure these axes group is hidden as well. And now we can start with the pen tool. So hitting Control plus, I'm going to zoom in. And then holding the spacebar, I can click and drag around. And hopefully as I draw, this will just mirror all the way across. And as you can see, this curve is outside of these symbols, so let's just drag it inside. And now you can see the shape goes all the way around. And any place where we hit an axis, we'll have to make sure it goes all the way up. So I'll select the node tool up here, or you can hit A. And then I can adjust this and make sure it snaps right on there. Back to the pen tool, and I'll just start tracing all these lines. And for now, it's just putting these curves right at the top when I create them. And that's fine, I can drop them in as soon as I finish a few of them. And for this section, I'll just be going back and forth between this pen tool and the node tool to make adjustments. And when you finish making a curve, if you hit escape once, it'll finish that little section, but you still have this selected. If you hit escape once more, it will deselect that curve. That way, when you make your next curve, you're not continuing that same curve. And when drawing a curve, if you hold shift, it'll snap to a 45-degree angle. So if you're doing a lot of straight line work, just keep holding shift and you'll make sure it's nice and clean. And the same goes when you're pulling out a handle. If you're holding shift, it'll snap to those degrees again. So now if we select all those curves, we can drop it right into this quadrant symbol. And instantly we get them on all four corners. And if we just drop a little shape back here in the background, just make this black so we can see. Now all those lines are in place and we already have a pretty cool shape going on. Everything's the same width, and so we'll add a little bit more thicknesses to things, but you can already see this is coming together really nicely, and we've only drawn a few lines. So using this mirror technique is really handy to speed things up. And now that I moved everything into this symbol, we can see a few small issues going on. Actually, just this one. This X shape here, it's overlapping a little bit, so I can just move that over. And for this shape here, if we fill this, then all those inside areas will be filled white. And just a quick overview of the pen tool in general. You single click to make a point. Oops, unselect that. So you single click and you'll make straight lines or linear curves. If you click and drag, you get these handles, so that way you can make smooth curves. And these handles are nice because if you hit A for this node tool, you can adjust these, make things really smooth. And if you hold Alt or Option, you can break those handles and get some hard edges. And you can also do that while drawing. So with the pen tool, you can make a few hard edges, click and drag to make a smooth edge. And then if you hold Alt or Option, you can spin this around and then make all sorts of complex shapes. So between the Alt or Option key and just clicking or drag clicking, you can make really complex curves. And for these shapes that have a thin line and a thick area, if you start on the tip there then you can just trace it around in this direction, and then it'll fill this inner hole. And you don't have to worry about drawing all the way back out this direction. So you can see I started at the tip, went around, and then I'll just fill this with white, and it's done. Now this piece here is a little trickier. It's just a little curve, but it looks like it has slanted tips. But I think what we'll do here is just use one curve and then make the stroke a lot thicker just to fill it out. That way the curve on the top here and the bottom here will be the same. And to make that curve properly, let's make a circle from the center. And I turned off snapping earlier. I'll turn that back on so we can find the center. I think right in there is pretty much it. And holding Control will make it go from the center and not from the side. And then holding Shift will make sure it's square or, equal-sided. So we'll draw out where that curve is. And we only want a stroke on this, so we can make a white stroke. And then expand it out. And it's a little hard to see because our fill is going on too. So we'll delete the fill by clicking this little circle with the red line through it. Now we can see this thickness coming in. Might be a little thick there. Okay, so we have this whole circle, but we only want this little piece of it. So we can convert this object to curves. So we don't have any more options. Now with the pen tool, if you hold Control and click here, it'll add a point. And that way, if we delete these other points, we just get left with this shape. So with these 2 points selected, I clicked this button here to break the curve. And that broke these apart, but it looks like I can't select this one. Well, this one's here. So I'm just going to select both of these and just nudge them down. And then I can delete that and then nudge these back up. That way the curve is still in the same direction. It still fits this contour perfectly. Then we just need to drop it into here. And it should duplicate on both sides. And now, hiding the reference, I can see some of the stuff didn't get put into the symbol. So I'll just grab these extra curves. They're kind of everywhere. And just drop them inside. And it looks like they disappeared. I somehow put them inside this curve. There we go. Now everything is inside this symbol. And you can see it's the same for all the other symbols now. And now we have a pretty cool, complex looking shape. And all we did was draw a few lines and make a few thicker objects. And I personally am not great with kind of vector design and, UI and futuristic UI design. So that's why I used a reference. And if you're feeling adventurous, you can definitely take these principles and make your own thing with it. But in my case, I just wanted to show how to use a few tools and make a pretty cool shape. If we break this apart into a couple sections, we can have several layers of depth in Spark AR. And that way, we'll actually be using the 3D elements of Spark and not just have this flat 2D image floating out there. So in this symbol, we have all these curves. And I think it'd look cool if this middle section here was going to be in front of the rest of the pieces. So we'll hide all these center pieces, save it out, and then invert the selection so we only see this side, and then we'll save that out as well. And because I didn't name anything, I'll just have to go in and click everything manually. Looks like that's everything. So I'll make these a group by hitting Control G. And I'll name this Inner Pieces. And then I'll do the same with the rest of them. And to select multiple, I'm holding Shift, and it selects everything in between. And then Control G to make a group. And this will be Outer Pieces. And I have a question for you. Why is inner spelled with 2 N's and outer is spelled with 1 T? That's always bugged me. Anyway, moving on. We'll just hide the centerpiece and also make sure to hide the background. We'll save this as a ping. And then do the same for the inner pieces. So now I have this inside piece and the outer piece. So that's all we need out of Affinity Designer. So I'll save this project and shut this down.